Hey guys, it's Courtney. Today I'm going to be using the stamp set Cool Christmas by MFT to create a one-layer card. So I'm starting with a piece of Eclipse masking paper here, and I'm just kind of cutting this a little bit wavy. I'm not worried about being too straight here. And I masked off the bottom, but this actually ended up not being necessary. I didn't end up doing any ink blending on the bottom. But I stamped my little car here with my little snowmen inside with blackout ink by Ink on 3 with just the bottoms of the tires over that mask. So you could have just wiped off the ink on the stamp and that would have been a little bit easier. I went ahead and masked out my image with a piece of Simon Says stamp masking paper, and then I took the little tree, one of the little trees that is in the stamp set. I'm going to stamp a few of these in the background. I started by just stamping one on either side. I masked that out and I just cut the mask for the actual tree part. I didn't worry about the tree trunk itself. And then I stamped a few additional trees behind the first two that I had stamped out, masked those off, and then took that other piece of Eclipse masking paper just to mask out where my snow ends and where my sky will begin. And we're going to be doing a little bit of ink blending in the background for the sky. I'm going to be using Peacock Feathers and Salty Ocean Distress Oxide ink, starting off with the Peacock Feathers there towards the bottom where the trees are. Then I'll add some Salty Ocean to the top. Then I'll go back with my Peacock Feathers and blend all of that out. Now you want to make sure that you give it some time or that you're really super careful when you remove your masks. Distress Oxides stay wet a lot longer, so it can tear your masks sometimes, especially the Simon Says stamp masking paper, not so much the Eclipse masking paper. But I went ahead and removed all of my masks here, and we'll move on to the Copic coloring. And I'm going to start with the background, or where my snow will be. So I'm going to start off with my B93, and I'm pretty much just putting some color down where my mask would have been had we done some ink blending. And I'm just pretty much putting a line down. I'm not worried about doing any kind of flicking here. I want this to be my darkest area. I'll also put a line of the B93 in the back, and this will be kind of where the roadway, I guess, that the car is on will end. Next, I'll take the B91, and I'm just flicking out that color a little bit on the top or towards the top, and I'll flip my card panel around and flick also towards the bottom. This will kind of give it the illusion that the area where these little snowmen are driving is kind of, still has snow on it, but it's kind of a pathway, I guess, not really a road. Once I had the B91 down, I'll move on to my C1, and I'm using more of the side of my nib here, and I'm just pushing that color out a little bit. Obviously, it's going to become even more of a gray tone at this point, and I'm okay with that. That's kind of the look that I'm looking for, but I just want to make sure that those colors are blended well together. I'm starting right off where we laid the B93. Even though lighter colors can pick up darker colors, that's kind of the look I'm going for. I don't want necessarily a smooth blend. I want kind of a snowy blend, I guess. Next, I'll go in with my colorless blender, and I'm going in from the opposite direction, flicking towards where I laid down my color, just to kind of remove some of those flick lines. Now for the roadway itself, I'm just putting very thin, faint lines of the B93 and the B91. Then I'll cover the entire area with that C1. This is just to kind of give that roadway a little bit of texture. The C1 will, again, tone that down, but it will make it more obviously a gray than a blue. Next, we'll move on to the coloring of our stamped images, and I'm going to start off with the car. I'm going to be using my BG markers here, and I'm laying out my lightest color first where my darkest areas will be. I'm not really too concerned with having perfect shading here. I am concentrating my darkest areas being off to the left and on the bottom part of the car where the tires are, and of course behind their little scarves that are kind of hanging down, that would create a shadow. Next, I'm moving on to the BG18, And I'm just putting a line down where my very darkest areas will be. I'm not going all the way around these little wheel wells. I'm going about halfway down. So my darkest areas, I guess, will be off to the left, and then again underneath where their little scarves are hanging down to create that little shadow. Next, I'll move on to the BG13, and I'm going to extend these areas out a little bit further. On the bottom part of the card, I'm still sticking to just a straight line, and where it's going over that wheel well, I made that a little bit thicker, but I also went a little bit further around that wheel well. Going over the same areas, just extending them out a little bit further, and then moving on to the BG13 and pretty much doing the same thing here. Again, on the bottom part of the card, I'm just sticking to that straight line. And for the rest of the areas, I am doing a little bit of flicking just to get a better blend. Finally, we'll go back in with the BG11, and I do have a hard time blending these colors, even though they're kind of right in line and they're supposed to blend easy. I don't find that they blend easy. So I am doing the tip to tip technique here just to get a little bit of an easier blend. And then I'll scribble down just the BG11 without touching it to the tip of the BG13 for my highlight color. Now for the wheels or the tires, I'm going to start off with my black marker. So this is the 100 marker. And I'm just going to add a little bit of shading off to the left, but I'm making sure that I'm not going as far down as where my snow begins. Next, I'll take the C7 and extend those out a little bit further. Again, being careful not to go too far down. Next with the C5, and then finally I'm going to bring in a little bit of the C3 just for the area where the snow is kind of laying over my tires. And I'll also do the little wheels or the rims with the C3 and the C1. The little bumper I just filled in solid with the C3. I didn't do any shading for that area. Now for the little snowmen, I'm going to color their scarves and hats first. And I'm going to start off with my YG markers. And I'm only using a 2-color blend for these areas. So whenever you're doing a 2-color blend, typically I like to stay with at least 3. That way you have a shadow, a highlight, and a midtone. But when you're only doing 2, I recommend you using 2 colors that are pretty far apart, enough where you're going to be able to see the contrast. So I'm laying out my lightest color, going in with the darkest areas next with the darkest color, and then blending that out with my highlight again, same way as we've been doing the entire time. Their hats, I'm just concentrating the darkest area being towards the bottom, being these 2 are kind of looking up in the air. And for the scarves, I'm just worrying about the left side of them. Going in with my reds, doing the same thing. For their little scarves, I'm doing shading on either side, being these are around their neck. It would be a round object. Same thing with the bottom part of their little hats, the winter hat ones. Next, I'll go in with the R46, pretty much go over those same areas that I had mapped out with the R43, then blend that back out with the R43. Now the little scarf on this little guy over to the left, I did the little parts that are hanging off, but I forgot the part that is actually around his neck. So I'll notice that in a little bit and I will go back and fix that. Now for the snowmen themselves, I didn't want to leave them just white. So I wanted to match kind of the rest of my snow. So I went in with my B91 and just added a little bit of shading to the left side of each of these little characters. And I put a little bit of color underneath their little carrot noses. That would also create a shadow. And then blended that out with my C1. For their little carrot noses, I went in with just 1 solid color. I didn't bother to do any shading on these areas at all. They are teeny tiny, and even their hats and their scarves, you could get away with not doing any shading on those either. Now for the trees, I'm going to be using the same color combination as I did for the scarves and hats, only I'm going to be adding 2 more colors in. Going to start off with my lightest color, mapping out my darkest areas and getting my paper saturated. I'm just going to be doing my shading on the base or the bottom part of the trees. Next, I'll go in with my darkest color, and I'm concentrating my darkest areas being in the center on the bottom, but not all the way to the edge, except for if one tree is hanging over another. I want to make sure that I preserve a highlight on either side of the trees so that I don't have one dark area directly next to another dark area. Next, I'll extend those flicks out a little bit further with my 2 mid-tone colors, and then I'll go back in with my YG21 and fill the rest of the area in. I wasn't getting as much of a contrast as I was really looking for, so I ended up going back in with my darkest color and just adding 1 or 2 flicks on the bottom part of the trees to kind of darken that area up a little bit, and then very quickly go over that with my lightest color to blend it out just a little bit. You want to make sure that you don't go over it too many times, or else you're going to blend it back in with that light color too much. Next, I colored the little trunks of the trees. Again, not doing any shading on these at all. These are teeny tiny areas. Now, some of my oxides are kind of on the bottom part of those trees, so that's going to look a little bit different. When you color over oxides, it gets a little bit muddy. So I'm just taking an EK Success journaling pen here and kind of outlining my little tree trunks there, so it's not so noticeable that these areas are different than the rest of the tree. Next, I took a white gel pen, and we're going to add a little bit of detail here. Well, first I took my colorless blender and cleaned up my messy areas, and then we'll go in with the white gel pen. I'm going to add to the snow that is underneath the tires, and I'm kind of just dabbing down my white gel pen and then wiping it or smearing it with my finger. Gel pens take a little bit of time to dry, so as long as you do this pretty quickly, this will just give it a little bit more texture. I also added some polka dots and some stripes to some of their scarves and their little hats, just to add a little bit more of a design so that it doesn't look like they're all wearing the same exact thing. And I did go back and add a little bit of snow once that first layer of gel pen was down for the tires. I did go back and add a little bit more. Now, if you notice that your gel pen is not flowing, just rub it on the tip of your finger, warm up the tip, and then you'll notice that it does come out a little bit better. So once my coloring was all complete, I took one of the sentiments from the stamp set, and I'm just going to be stamping this flat onto my card panel with VersaFine Onyx Black ink right over my sky. Then I'll take my white gel pen and I'm going to add snow just to the sky area. I didn't end up putting this over the entire panel, but I just wanted to stamp my sentiment first to make sure that I put my snow around the sentiment. Last, I took a wink of Stella and just added some shimmer to the snow, and I did this in random places. I'm kind of just skipping it around so that when you kind of tilt it in the light, it'll shimmer just like snow would. And that is the card for today, guys. Thanks a lot for stopping by, and have a great day. Bye.